Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashley Hayes. I hope you can see me on the screen here in the little block box at the top. I am the Senior Manager of Strategy and Operations for Community Development and Programs at Blue Star Families. Welcome to Blue Star Families Network's Live On Demand webinars, where we are providing our military families with personal and professional development opportunities from around the world, no matter where you're stationed. I'm a fellow military spouse myself. My husband is stationed aboard Camp Lejeune here in sunny Jacksonville, North Carolina. I have a few housekeeping items before we get started. I have Blue Star Family's amazing Senior Manager of Technology, Kelly Babbs, on the webinar as well, to assist us if anything goes crazy with technology. She'll also be helping to get your voice heard throughout the webinar. We hope that you'll want to interact, interrupt, engage as we go through this topic today. So please don't hesitate to jump in if you have a question. You can do this by either using the chat box, which you can click at the bottom of your screen to open if you don't already see it. And Kelly and I will be your voice if you choose to use that option. Or feel free to raise your hand and we will promote you to a panelist where you're free to ask Doug your question personally. So please note that there's a half a second delay for when we transfer you from a viewer to a panelist. So please don't be concerned that I've kicked you off. That has not happened. Also, as many of you are aware, for the first 20 military families that sign up and attended this live webinar tonight, you will receive your very own copy of Doug's book in the coming weeks, thanks to Doug's generosity and passion to support our military families. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Doug McCormick. He is a former Army officer, professional investor, and author of Family Inc. He is going to talk with us about achieving financial security, economic empowerment among active duty and veteran military families. Go ahead, Doug, take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it. Good evening, and appreciate everybody making time in their busy schedules for this important topic. My goal for this discussion is to not have this simply be a financial literacy discussion around, how to pay down your credit card, but rather a very broad discussion and one that's relatively ambitious, because I hope you leave tonight with an understanding of the key drivers of financial security and really a general game plan for making the most of your opportunities to achieve that security. I'm really excited to be partnering with Blue Star Families and Ashley for really two reasons. I think the single most impactful way to economic empowerment among our military families is by improving the professional opportunities for military spouses. And we'll discuss that later in the presentation about what we can do as community members to improve that opportunity set. And secondly, I believe that military spouses are ideally positioned to be their family CFO and really help the family navigate the many big financial decisions that they'll be required to do over a lifetime. So as we get started, as Ashley said, I'd rather this be a conversation than a presentation. And Ashley's helped me with this presentation, so she'll keep me honest, and she'll chime in for you, but feel free to chime in from yourselves. A little bit about my background. The thing I want you to take away from my background is that in many ways I've experienced a lot of the challenges and the community that you have. It's been a very rewarding experience, but I think that the military experience creates some unique economic challenges. So I was an academy graduate at West Point, active duty for a period of time, left service after my second duty assignment, and transitioned to a civilian career with a young family. Like many transitioning veterans, I used school as an opportunity to gain skills before I went back to the workforce. So I went to business school, and then from business school, moved my family down to Manhattan to work for an investment bank on Wall Street. And I've essentially been, as Ashley said, a professional investor for the past 20 years. So, after 20 years, why am I still so passionate about this issue for, military families? I would tell you my own experiences lead me to believe, A, this is hard, and B, I've learned a lot along the way that I think I can share with folks that are navigating some of these big choices. When I graduated business school, we had accumulated so much debt from being a young family living in Boston, paying tuition, that I literally had to borrow from a family friend to move my family down to Manhattan. And, you know, as I sat there in our unfurnished apartment with no money coming out of business school, I realized that financial security is not about working hard. It's not about being smart. It's not about being well educated. All of those things help, but it's really about understanding the big financial choices that families and people have to navigate in life. And so that's the goal of today, is to kind of you know, walk through some of those big choices. So we're very briefly going to cover the state of financial literacy in America. I'm going to try to explain to you all what I call the financial game of life and the pyramid for achieving financial security. I think we need to talk a little bit about the unique challenges that the military community and spouses face around financial security and what that means for employing this pyramid. And we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a family CFO or chief financial officer. And I'll give you some tips for avoiding common pitfalls to financial security. So then we'll wrap it up. And again, we can take questions at the end. But if you've got questions in the interim, feel free to interrupt me and we'll make this conversational. So the state of financial literacy in America, as this picture shows, most of us are confused. And at the bottom of the page here, we've got a couple scary statistics. You know, 60% of adults admit they have no budget. 50% of American households no savings. Average credit card debt is $15,000. And if you really want to get scary, you can talk about retirement savings or lack thereof among most families. So the state of financial literacy in America is pretty bad. And unfortunately, there are things that are going on in our economy and our country today that are making the consequences even worse, and therefore creating an increasing need for good financial literacy skills. And so I'm just going to tick down through these really quick, but you know, increasing cost of education and healthcare make financial security harder for American families. The labor markets are increasingly dynamic, and we're using technology to come up with new ways to do things, to provide services like Amazon or Uber. And that is making it candidly more challenging to create a stable career. There's been a really rapid increase in the expectation for voluntary career transition. So my granddad likely had 2 to 3 jobs in a career. And today's millennial will likely have more than 10 jobs throughout a career. So constant changing companies and positions, which creates financial risk. You know, our financial products have become increasingly complex. So 50 years ago, someone would have about 350 mutual funds to choose from. Today, they would have over 8,000. And in the midst of all that complexity, many of the safety nets that people have relied on historically, like Social Security or Medicare or a pension plan at their employer, arguably those safety nets are being changed or at risk of being changed. And on top of all that, we all are the beneficiaries of better technology in healthcare, which is improving life expectancies. But the great gift there is you also have to pay for that longer life expectancy. And so people are required to manage a retirement for many more years than they used to 50 years ago. So the things that your mom and dad did to achieve financial security, work hard at a job, stay employed, and save 10% of your salary, those are not enough in this environment to be financially secure.
Doug, as you speak to the number of people that are, you know, how millennials changing jobs so often, I think that's even more relevant among military spouses since we're moving more. I think that number 10 is significantly higher.
I totally agree. And I think there are a lot of consequences to what that means for the military spouse community in terms of unemployment, underemployment, and the ability to really create a career versus have a job. So with that, you know, I try to have people think about what I call the financial game of life. And this is a graphic that's intended to explain that. So they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Let me orient you to the picture real quick. So this is the wealth that a 25-year-old person could have over a lifetime. And of course, these are all estimates. So this is relates to no specific person, but I think the general concept is important. And on the y-axis, which is the up and down axis, these are dollars. And on the x-axis, which is the left and right, this is a person's age. And what you have here is the green represents the asset that someone has in their labor, how much their labor will be worth over time. And the red and the purple are your financial assets and your expected Social Security. And so what you see here is that a person at 25 coming out newly minted undergraduate degree can expect over a lifetime of roughly 45 years to earn about $2 million. And as they earn that, they obviously consume those earnings with the things that they need to buy throughout life, but they also save a little bit. And over time, the red grows as they're converting their labor into financial resources. And at the same time, they're developing Social Security benefits. And so this is really the financial game of life. No matter whether you're a doctor or in the Army or a business person, you're really in the same business, which is converting your labor into financial resources such that when you have no labor left, it's time to retire, you have enough financial resources to satisfy your needs. And there are a couple really, in my mind, important things that come out of this picture. The one is, by far and away, the biggest asset that most of us have is our labor potential to sell that into the market. So as you think about financial security, it really starts and ends with making good investments in your labor through education and making good career choices. I think the second interesting insight here is that for most of us, we're wealthiest when we're young and we have no money. And that's kind of counterintuitive, but as a young person, you've got a lot more labor potential left. And so what it really says is you got to make good choices with those labor, and there's opportunity cost not to working. So every year that you don't work, you know, you've lost a year of your labor, but you haven't generated any income or any savings. And so that obviously has real consequences for folks who can't find a job because they've relocated or can't get back into the workforce for health reasons, et cetera. So that's, in general, the financial game of life that we all play.
How is this model different for military families?
You know, I think there are three things that are worth mentioning here. The first is military families, most will navigate a significant transition from military service to civilian profession, and that happens relatively early for most. And so making sure you're being thoughtful about how to financially navigate that, I think, is one. The second is, if you do make a career out of service, you're likely to have another big asset toward the end of your life, and that's your pension. And so that is certainly a valuable asset. And I think the third is, you know, military families and military spouses are more likely to be underemployed and unemployed. And so as you think about a family as two incomes, so this chart would look like $4 million for a young family, a husband and wife, then maybe your starting asset value is lower because of the lack of professional opportunity a military spouse may have. And so I think that's an important thing that people need to think through in terms of what it means for saving rates or what choices military spouses can make to maximize the value of that labor.
Great.
So given that, you know, I recommend that people think about creating a pyramid for economic empowerment. And this is for all Americans, but there are really four aspects of the pyramid: education, career management, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. And so I'll just talk to those briefly. Education is simply turning raw labor into valuable skills that can be sold in today's economy. This is one of the biggest ways to dramatically change financial security, is making good investments in education. The second is career management, and that's essentially learning to sell your labor into the marketplace. Could be interview skills, could be networking skills, and it's also learning how to pick good jobs that offer careers beyond simply jobs. Financial literacy is really learning how to turn that labor asset into a financial asset, i.e. spend less than you earn, and learning how to deploy your assets such that they grow. And the pinnacle of financial security, in my mind, is entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship at its most basic level is combining your labor capital and your financial capital to create a business. And I think, as we'll talk later, that's a really compelling opportunity for all Americans, but I think, you know, for military spouses and the military community in general. So, what the game of life that I described and the pyramid, I think, is for the most part relevant for all Americans. But as you all know, military families and spouses face unique challenges. And let's just kind of tick down through these. 83% of veterans make mid-career transitions. Today, with no retirement benefits, that retirement program is changing, so that will change in the future. Effective transition really requires mastering, a new language of business. Ashley, as you mentioned, this soldier mobility deployments often limits the professional networks that a military family has when they think about transitioning. They haven't grown up in the same community for the last 20 years. They've been in 5 different communities for the last 20 years. And that can also lead to a challenging employment environment for spouses, which can limit wealth, income, and flexibility when the family decides to transition. I think veterans and military families are more likely to have dependents early in life. And on the positive side, active duty soldiers, veteran families are relatively highly developed labor skills and highly educated. And so that's the real asset that they have to mitigate some of these challenges. So, if you go back to our pyramid and think about the unique things that military families have to deal with, it changes these a little bit. And so my assessment of the pyramid is slightly different for military families to consider. For the most part, as I mentioned, military families are highly educated, and that by far and away will be the biggest asset as they think about using those labor skills to drive financial security. When it comes to career management, I think candidly the community is mediocre at this, and that's a product of the experiences, but in many cases we don't understand the language of business. We haven't had a chance to develop the professional network that is a critical element of career management. I think one of the great strengths of the military community is its humility and its focus on teamwork, and that's a real asset, but I think sometimes in the business world we undersell ourselves. And so as people think about navigating their career, getting comfortable in, outside of the military community, of effectively articulating their ability to contribute to an organization and sell themselves is a little uncomfortable for many service members and their families. And then lastly, when it comes to career management, as you look at where posts are located throughout the country, those do not always coincide with pockets of significant professional opportunity. And so military families need to be thoughtful about finding the best jobs in the areas where they're located. And lastly, or not lastly, but as you move up the pyramid, financial literacy, I think the Department of Defense and the services do a great job of acknowledging that military families have unique demands, such as deployments, frequent moves, et cetera. And so they try to make the financial aspects of that career choice as simple as possible. So through DoD, you can get insurance, both healthcare and life insurance. Your taxes are simpler than if you're in a civilian workforce. You're often provided housing and you have access to commissary. And as a result of that, in many cases, when people transition out, their financial literacy skills are not as fully developed as someone who's had to kind of do all those things on an individual basis in the economy. And so just an acknowledgement that this is an area where people really need to invest. I mentioned that entrepreneurship is really the pinnacle of financial security. I think the veteran community, military service members, veterans, and spouses have the innate skills to be really successful entrepreneurs. They're often leaders. They're comfortable with being in leadership positions. They're great communicators. They're disciplined and they persevere. But if you're going to pursue entrepreneurship, they also have to acknowledge they need mentors. They need to proactively invest in networks, and they need to learn how to access capital so they can fund their venture and pursue that entrepreneurial dream. So the bottom line here is, the pyramid still works, but it has to acknowledge those unique differences and challenges that the military community and military families faces.
And Doug and I will, at the end of the presentation, go over some resources that touch on each of these pieces of the pyramid that can help provide you some success in these areas.
Thank you, Ashley. I think one of the great things here is there are lots of resources out here in all of these distinctly different areas. And so I think it's about finding the right resource for your particular need. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time on each element of this pyramid. As I mentioned, the first aspect of the pyramid was education. So there's a lot of discussion and debate in today's economy about, is education still a good investment? So let me make that clear. The answer is overwhelmingly yes. There's a lot of numbers on this page. Let me try to explain what this is, and just at a very high level, give you my rationale for why education is still such a great investment. So this lists on the left-hand side various accomplishments in terms of education. So someone with no high school all the way up to someone who's achieved a doctoral degree. And the second column, which says implied earnings, show the average implied earnings for someone with that educational degree on an after-tax basis. And then the third column, which is probably the most important, shows the value of that labor over an entire career, if you had on average a doctor's degree or a bachelor's degree or a high school degree, et cetera. And so what you see clearly is that, the higher the degree, for the most part, the higher the expected lifetime earnings. And so on average, you could tell your child, as they think about making investments in college, the average high school graduate over a lifetime could expect to earn about $1.4 million. Having said that, if they went and completed a 4-year degree and got a bachelor's degree, they would expect to earn, almost $2 million, 1.97, which is almost $1 million greater than the high school. So while those numbers are bound to be wrong and they're simply estimates, I think they're very clear that investments in education have real payoffs in terms of your ability to have a career that generates an income and results in financial security for the family. Now, all that analysis assumes that you have the aptitude for school, that you want to pursue a career that requires education, and that you're going to work after college. But if you have those attributes, this is still a very attractive investment. Is it as good as it was 15 years ago, given the way education costs have increased? Perhaps not. Is it likely to be way better than any other investment you could make? Absolutely. So investments in education, if you've got the aptitude, exceptional investments and a real key to achieving financial security. There's been a lot of study about, averages are deceiving. And what I mean by that is it's hard to say that investments in education without talking about what kind of education, can have very different outcomes. And this simply just shows a number of degrees that you could study as an undergraduate and the median salary and the mid-career median salary for those degrees. And the clear trend is that degrees that focus on science, technology, engineering, or math get paid more on average in the workforce. And my recommendation to folks is not to pursue a degree because it compensates a certain way. Pursue what you're good at, pursue what you love, pursue what you're passionate about, but do so as an informed consumer where you understand the financial consequences of that degree of study.
Doug, how do these pay scales overlap with, jobs that work well for military spouses? That's something we also need to take in consideration as, we're moving, and if we get careers, or if we get educated in a job that's, where I'm stuck with a license, per that state, it can be a little more challenging.
Yeah. So not to speak to the specifics of school and nursing and some of those career choices, which have certain accreditation requirements, but in general, I would say these skills that pay highly are actually very good skills for military families. And that's not because, posts are directly located with employers that do a lot of work in petroleum engineering or actuarial mathematics, but it's that these jobs are in these skill sets are in high demand, and employers will work hard to keep that employee, will consider things like remote work environments, commuting, et cetera. So I think the bottom line is if you go to school and create a skill that's in high demand, you're likely to have a better chance of selling that skill no matter where you live. And employers today are more and more flexible about creating attractive arrangements to keep good talent.
Great.
So just to wrap up on education, I think military families have a couple unique considerations. Many families are already highly educated, and that's a great resource. For many families, the GI Bill is the single biggest asset that they will likely have, certainly a transition. And so to appreciate that and think how to deploy it effectively. And then I think, veterans and veteran families are very attractive customers, if you will, for higher education institutions. And so when you're out there shopping for college, it's really important to assess what you're getting. And so my recommendations for families transitioning out who are going to go back to school is start slow but finish fast. And what I mean by that is don't be in a rush to get to college. Make sure you know what you want to do. Make sure you have a plan. But once you start, try to get through it as quickly as possible. It maximizes your chance of graduation and successful completion. Shop around for the schools and look at graduation rates for veterans. They're dramatically different by school, and a high graduation rate, I believe, implies they understand the veteran community, they understand how to support you through that experience. And make sure you see the big picture as you evaluate schools. If you have dependents, think about which school offers an environment that will be a good environment for your family to flourish while you're getting your education. Let me just pause here a second at the bottom of the page. I think this is one of the big takeaways from the presentation. Investments in education are likely the single biggest and impactful financial decision that you will make in a lifetime. More important than buying a house, more important than buying a car, in many cases, even more important than individual job selection. So take this seriously, give it a lot of thought, and understand the importance of this single decision.
Yeah, Doug, just to add some personal experience to what you're speaking to, when I went back to get my degree at Central Michigan University, I had started 2 classes, and then my husband was coming home from a deployment, and they let me, stop the program at the time. I thought I was going to go back, a few months later, but I ended up not going back 4 years later because I had 2 children. But they did allow me the flexibility, and when I decided to come back, they took me with open arms. So there definitely are universities out there that are willing to work with you as a military family and spouse to help you. I mean, they want to see you succeed. So.
Yeah, and I think a good indicator of how well that university knows the military community is how many military community members are going there, because the only way to really understand it and begin to develop programs that accommodate it is you've got to have the community there. So totally agree. Thank you. So now we've talked about education. The second pillar of that pyramid is career management. A couple key takeaways here. I find that people, when they think about profession, they often think about compensation, and they think about it in the short term. They're looking at 2 jobs and they ask themselves, what is this job going to pay me this year? I think that's the wrong way to think about it. If you go back to the financial game of life, you go back to the compensation study, it's about lifetime compensation. So don't pick a career or a job that pays well this year. Pick the job that pays well over a lifetime. And understand, as the second point says, compensation comes in many forms. It's not simply how much cash do you make on a monthly basis or a commission, but it includes things like maybe the opportunity to have a small ownership position in the company, the benefits that you're offered in terms of insurances and healthcare, but also the skills and the brand that you get to develop personally that comes from your affiliation with that organization. And I think by far and away, the most important forms of compensation are often skills and brand as you think about maximizing your lifetime compensation. The last point, I advise people to think like an investor when you make career decisions. A good career is more than working hard. It's working smart. And that includes things like trying to pick industries that are growing rapidly. So, is there likely to be more career opportunity at a place like Google versus a slow growing industry like the airlines or a grocery chain? Pick professional functions that apply to many industries so that you can move from one industry to another if those prospects change over time. That's the kind of thought process and decision making that I think leads to good, solid careers.
And Doug, when you talk about compensation coming in many forms, for active duty militaries, spouses sometimes don't need that healthcare piece, and they can use that to their advantage when working with potential employers as a way to work what they're getting paid as a salary if they don't need that benefit.
Totally agree. No, I think, rightfully viewed, employers should be looking at what's the total cost of compensation for this person. And that's not only what I'm paying them, but what are the expenses of all those benefits. And if you don't need all those benefits, I think that either translates into you being a more attractive employee or perhaps getting a little bit more take-home pay. Totally agree. So as you think about career, we talked about the fact that military spouses face some unique career challenges. They include the fact it could be frequent moves. It could be that your spouse has deployments which cause you to have additional family responsibilities, or it could be that the community which you're located in doesn't have significant professional opportunity. And these are not easy problems to solve. Kathy and I had written an article about some of the big negative impacts that those challenges create in the community, and it's a real cost to the families. It's a real cost to our economy and our nation. I think one way to offset some of those challenges is think about the kind of careers that offer characteristics that are conducive to the lifestyle. And so that could mean, things like flexibility, things like geographic flexibility, working remote, et cetera. I often find that entrepreneurship and elements of the gig economy. A gig economy is kind of a private contractor. You may be writing software code. You may be, a contractor for administrative services, et cetera. All those offer an interesting mix of control and autonomy and flexibility. I think people often ask, what kind of careers, give me examples of those kind of careers. And I would give you examples of careers that are very portable. So careers in managing human resources, careers related to sales in any business, careers related to information technology, careers in the financial industry. And I don't necessarily mean banking, but I mean like treasury, control functions for companies, accounting, because those skills, no matter what industry, no matter what part of the country you live in, those are skills that many businesses need. And then I think we talked about jobs that mesh very well with the use of technology and allow you to work remotely. Again, things like customer support, things like sales, where you can do that no matter where you're from. So as you think about career, I think insurance becomes an important aspect of complementing your career with the appropriate levels of insurance. I think people often don't understand what they're trying to insure. And so very specifically, when you think about insurance, you're really trying to insure the loss of that labor potential. So if we went, all the way back to the financial game of life, and if someone passed away early, essentially they've foregone all this extra labor and the family is without that great asset. And so as you think about insurance, it's really thinking about how much labor you believe you have left. Do you want to work another 10 years, another 20 years? Making some estimate about how much money you expect to make over that time period. And that's the amount of insurance you should consider. Obviously, military families have unique risks when it comes to deployments and possible combat. I absolutely recommend SGLI or family SGLI at the maximum limits given those risks. And I have to point out insurance is a loser's game. And by that, what I mean is your expected premiums are likely going to be more than your expected payout. But in spite of being a loser's game, it's still an important tool because it gives you that certainty to ensure your family is well taken care of if something should happen to either member of the family.
Doug, as an active duty family, we automatically have that option to, partake in SGLI. Do you think that, or would you recommend that military families purchase additional to the maximum amount?
I personally would. And so if I get back to the question of what are we trying to insure against, it's lost future labor. And so, let's just say for argument's sake, a young family at age 25 is thinking about their insurance needs, and SGLI is 400,000. But that young family that person intends to work from 25 to 65, so that's 40 years. We said that was a $2 million after-tax expected compensation over a lifetime. So if you had a family and children and all the obligations that come along with that, I would argue the 400,000 is substantially less than your potential loss. So long-winded way of saying, yeah, I'm a fan of complementing that insurance depending on where you are in your career stage.
Okay.
So as we think about financial literacy, I think there are a couple key themes that will serve you well. Most of the time when I talk to people about assets, they think about investment products. And I want to encourage you to focus on the many functions that your assets serve. Most important is an emergency fund for life's curveballs. Then you fund your life's needs for consumption, a roof over your head, and food. Thirdly, I recommend investments in yourself through education and entrepreneurship. And then after those things, I recommend an investment program that will ultimately be the foundation for, security and retirement. As you think about defining the right goals for your asset management business, focus on the long term and focus on simplicity. Simplicity is long-term returns on your assets after things like fees, expenses, and taxes. And make sure your financial plan includes all of the assets available. Most financial planners and most families, they think about their money as their financial assets. They don't think about their labor. They don't think about their real estate. They don't take into account Social Security. And if you're active duty and you make a career out of it, your pension is another significant asset. I think using history to help inform your view of what's possible in the future in terms of your planning assumptions is always helpful. In today's environment, I think most people would say that a return on your investments of 3 to 5% after tax, after inflation over the long term is probably a reasonable planning assumption. I think it's important to understand when debt can be an important tool for a family and when it can get you in trouble. Some people say all debt is bad. I really don't believe that. I think in general, the rule should be debt can be an important tool to acquire assets that preserve their value or grow. Things like real estate, like a home, or investments in education. I would try to avoid debt for things like consumption, eating out with a credit card, buying things that are going to go down in value over time. And then I think, I think a lot of people get lost in the woods, or get lost in the trees by focusing on the details when they budget. And I think a high-level perspective will serve you well. So see the big picture. The big picture is simply when everything's left over at the end of the month, do I have anything left over for savings? Am I spending less than I'm making? If you can kind of remember that big picture, you're generally on the right long-term track to financial security. So now we've covered education, we've covered career, we've covered financial security. I'm going to just very briefly talk about entrepreneurship for military family members. Again, a lot of times when people think entrepreneurship, they think about Facebook or Google. They think about these big successful ventures, and those are fantastic stories of entrepreneurship. But I think in many cases, I would encourage people to think small. And by that, what I mean is there's lots of opportunity to create a small business where you're a sole proprietor, you're a consultant, you are managing a maintenance business and a repair business. And all those are smaller businesses that require less capital, and in many cases offer less risk to the investor or the person. And entrepreneurship is really nothing more than using your own money, combining it with your labor to create a business. In the long term, I think this is really compelling. It's got a lot of benefits. It gives you a lot of control. It generally allows you to earn more than you can earn in the marketplace alone. It allows you to work longer in life because you don't have to retire, let's say at 60. You can continue to be an owner of the business, work a little bit less, and still enjoy the benefits of ownership. It's generally more tax efficient. And I think, it provides a lot of control and autonomy. I think the big risk is, by definition, entrepreneurs have a lot of eggs in one basket. And so your wealth is concentrated in your business. And so that's certainly a negative that you've got to manage for. But I think you can manage around that with your other financial choices. So with that, I think I want to talk a little bit about all the resources. Again, these are organized based on these 4 pillars of financial security: education, career management, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. There are a lot more resources out there, but these were ones that Ashley and I knew and think highly of. Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you a little bit to talk about anything that you think is worthy here.
Okay, yeah. A few of them that I added on here, and like Doug said too, there are tons of resources out there that are at your fingertips to use. You just need to research and to find what's available to you. But to point out a few, under education, my CAA, it's my career advancement account, and this is actually one of the main reasons why I went back to school, is because they provided me with $4,000 to go back and get my degree. It's a great option for military spouses. And if you're eligible, take advantage of it. It's truly a great tool. Under entrepreneurship, the Millspo Project, they do several different webinars and different events in communities that focus on entrepreneurship and helping military spouses in business. Under careers, Blue Star Families, we offer a variety of employment resources for military spouses. We actually have career managers on the ground in Jacksonville, Florida, and San Diego to assist military spouses on their career journey. So if you're in either of those locations, please reach out to us, and their information is on our website. We also have recently partnered with Hire Heroes USA to help you get career ready. We also partner with Onward to Opportunity, and they provide different training opportunities. Like Doug said, they offer to get in the technology field, they offer a number of tools that you can go back and get trained in certain areas that focus on different technology aspects. And they're partnering really closely with us on helping to provide those opportunities, not only to veterans, but to military spouses. And there's several other resources on here that you can see. The only thing I would like to add before Doug starts going over a couple of the recommendations that he has on here is that, you are your biggest advocate when it comes to understanding what resources are available to you in regards to education, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and careers. You just have to, be motivated and push yourself to access those and use them to your advantage. So, Doug, you want to talk about a few of the other ones?
Yeah, no, thanks. Actually, I think that was great. I don't really want to talk about any of these in particular. I would just offer 3 comments. The first is, you see this broad list. There is no silver bullet here. There is no one thing that's going to give you all the answers. So be prepared to, take advantage of a lot of different resources. The second is, even if you don't get exactly what you're looking for at these organizations are also an opportunity to network with people that can be mentors and your peers who you can collectively figure out things together with. So this is about community. And the last thing I would tell you is, this journey in financial security is not a discrete event. It's not like you're going to figure it all out once and then you've accomplished it. This is a lifelong journey. And so these resources are not just for someone at age 22 or a time of transition. These resources, appropriately viewed, should be resources as you navigate this game of life throughout the life.
Doug, I also want to mention that, you know, even though you see like Student Veterans of America, I was exploring their website the other day. They are offering their resources to military spouses as well. So just because it says, you know, veterans or service members, you know, you as a military spouse may still have the opportunity to participate in, you know, one of these opportunities. So just to throw that out there.
Great point. Great point. Thanks. So we're getting close to the end here. I want to talk about what does it mean to be a family CFO. But before I do that, I want to just make the point that you on the phone here are very well positioned to be the family CFO. And the key takeaway of all this is not any one of these individual points, but that the family CFO is a very broad set of responsibilities. And it's much more strategic. It's more than simply paying your bills on a monthly basis. It's managing a budget. It's managing all of your assets relative to your return needs and your risk needs. And when I say all of your assets, it's not just your investment assets, but your labor, your Social Security benefits, et cetera. You know, it's thinking about investments in education and entrepreneurship for the family, and it's managing risk through things like insurance. And, you know, maybe most importantly, it's thinking about succession planning. You know, you're never really secure until you've effectively passed along those skills to the next generation. And as you think about, you know, some key tenets to remember as you're on your journey to be, you know, your family CFO, again, I'm hopeful to give you the high-level guiding principles, and you'll over time figure out the very specifics. But remember, no matter what your profession, you're a business owner, you're in the business of selling your labor and managing your assets. Remember that labor is likely your largest asset, and you must actively manage it just like you would your financial assets. Your most likely best investment is investments in your labor and career and entrepreneurship. And while savings and accumulating assets for retirement is a really important goal, the first thing you have to ensure is the ability to deal with life's curveballs, and so creating a financial a contingency reserve. And when you're thinking about your investment program, just always remember that you've got to consider all your assets. Insurance is an important part of career planning. And lastly, it's a lot more fun to grow wealth than save your way to wealth. And by that, what I mean is grow wealth through investing in your career, grow wealth through becoming an entrepreneur, grow wealth by arranging your assets in a way that they grow, so your assets are working for you even when you're not working for you. And I think if you stay on those kind of high-level points, you've kind of got a guiding North Star that'll get you to good decisions. I see a couple common pitfalls when people make bad choices. So I'll just summarize these quickly. Remember, compensation is much more than how much you get paid. It's branding, it's skills, it's benefits. Remember the complete definition. Don't forget about the importance of financial flexibility, especially for young families in service who may have to navigate a transition to a civilian life. Financial flexibility is an asset, and it's an asset that you have to build over time. It's not like you can create financial flexibility the month before you get out of service. And financial flexibility comes through saving, minimizing your expenditures, avoiding debt, etc. You know, don't lose sight of the priorities of capital. A contingency reserve is always the first priority. Consider this a journey that's a long-term journey. So don't focus on next year, focus on the next 30 years. Remember, don't forget about all of your assets, not just your financial assets. Don't confuse assets versus consumption. Assets are houses, assets are investments in education or financial products. Consumption is eating out, buying a car, etc. Remember that entrepreneurship is often not as risky as you think. And succession planning, if you don't have it, it's a lot easier to lose wealth than it is to accumulate it, and it happens a lot more quickly. So Ashley, this is just a summary of some of the resources that you can check out regarding Family Inc., which is the book I wrote, as well as some articles to include one that I've written with Blue Star about spouse and the employment picture. And then lastly, some resources about the Blue Star Families Career Program.
Yeah, and if you guys, if you leave here and you think of something that you forgot to ask Doug or myself about Blue Star Families, or if you're reading the book that you're going to get in the mail, if you're reading it one night and something pops in your head and you want to ask Doug a question, feel free to email me. My email is ahayes@bluestarfam.org, and I will write that in the chat box. For those wishing to, thank you, Kelly. So feel free to email me. It looks like we did get a couple extra questions. Kelly, do you want to ask those?
I will, thank you. So Doug, this one's for you. As a military family, we are continually told to create a budget from our command and installation. However, we never seem to be able to follow it. Do you have any tips or recommendations?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, there's a planning bias where we're very good at estimating our expenses. We're very good at estimating what's coming in because we can predict that relatively well. And we think we know our expenses, but generally we underestimate them. And so I think you've always got to create an appropriate level of cushion. And the second thing I would say is don't get lost in the details. I don't think there's big benefit to tracking, every cup of coffee you bought, because I find that most people, when they get very detailed, they spend a lot of time tracking the details. They don't spend a lot of time changing behavior. And so if you focus on the big questions like, am I saving the amount monthly that I budgeted? I care less about where it got spent. I think that simplicity will help you stay on track.
I like that. Thanks. One financial challenge that we have run into as a military family is purchasing a home and then, I know this one, and then leaving 3 years later and not being able to sell at purchase price because the market dropped. Is it still a smart idea to buy while you're on active duty?
Yeah, so I generally say no. And so my general concern with this issue is a house is a very long-term asset. And if you're in the military and still moving frequently, you have a short-term time horizon. And so there's a mismatch between that asset and that time horizon. So for some people that are toward the end of their career, or they know that they're going to end up back near the Pentagon somewhere, and so they have that unique long time horizon, it may make sense. But in general, I don't believe that, folks that are moving frequently should be buying those kind of assets. And I think it does a couple things. One is, we talked about financial flexibility for veterans who may transition is a real asset. Purchasing a home while still in service reduces that financial flexibility. The second thing is, I don't really believe that houses are great investments. They're okay investments, but when you fully look at them with all the costs associated with taxes, with maintenance, with closing costs, with management, if you decide to rent, it's debatable how good it is. And so I think simplicity trumps here. And I'd recommend, if you have extra capital, invest it in the market and maintain your flexibility.
Thank you. Here's another one that just came in. What suggestions do you have for teaching teenagers about financial management? I guess, Amy Jerome, that might be part of that succession planning, right?
Yeah.
Hang on. Sorry. We struggle to impart skills such as balancing a checkbook with all the technology that's out there. Do you have suggestions for apps that appeal to teens and teach the same?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just be honest with you. I don't have any good suggestions for apps that appeal to teens on financial literacy, but there's certainly a need. That's a great question. In terms of advice I have in terms of getting kids interested in this topic and teaching, I have a couple points. The first is, life is full of everyday teaching lessons. So, your kids are role modeling, they're watching how you behave. And if you can take the opportunity to explain why you're making decisions around, financial choices, I think there's an opportunity to educate every day. So for example, if you're buying a car, it's a great opportunity to talk about how to buy a car and understand, how to do your shopping to make sure that you're getting a good deal. It's a great opportunity to talk about the fact that cars are, something that the family may need, but not a good investment because they're a depreciating asset. It's a chance to talk about borrowing and financing the car with debt and what an interest rate is, et cetera. So I just think life is full of opportunities. I will tell you, my own family, my kids would tell you they're sick of me pointing out these many great opportunities, but I'm still doing it, and they're still taking it in whether they like it or not.
Doug, you had also mentioned on the resources slide, and when we were going, over this presentation, that the USA Foundation, does some literacy stuff too. I actually attended an event a couple weeks ago where they handed out books to military families on how to talk to your kids about financial literacy and get them involved. And so, if you have a branch near you, I'm sure they may have them on hand, but that's just another resource that is out there for your access.
Great point. I think one thing in general, when you're talking to any age group about financial literacy, I think it's about making it relevant to their time horizon. So for example, if you're talking to a 22-year-old soldier about retirement, that doesn't resonate. But if you're talking to that young soldier about preparing for transition and having the flexibility to create a good career and a good life, that may translate. If you're talking to your kids about how to afford a car and the benefits of education, which is right in front of them, that translates well as well. So I think it's, in many cases, the conversation needs to be time appropriate.
Awesome, thank you. Ashley, do we have time? I have one more.
Yeah, I see one more here too.
Okay, I'll go, then you go. In referencing the budget question, Doug, Leah asks, my greatest challenge as a family CFO is that every time we move, my husband pay changes, often significantly. In your experience, have you ever found a good tool for military families to accurately understand pay changes as they move?
Yeah, so I got to be totally honest, I have not. But I've been out long enough that it's changed so dramatically that I'm not sure I'm a good resource to answer that question either.
Totally fair. Leah, I happen to know Leah, so full disclosure, I don't know for the Navy, but I know in the Army, we do have financial counselors that come around to the units from time to time. I would suggest checking with them.
Okay. Yeah, I see another question. Will we be sending out the presentation to all attendees to access those links in the reference section? And yes, I will send that out to everybody who attended this evening. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
And I will also be posting it on Blue Star Family's YouTube channel so that everybody can watch at their leisure over and over.
Great. Hey, well, Ashley, thanks so much for putting this together. What I've learned over this process is that Ashley is a personal finance expert as well. So she's going to be a great resource for folks that have questions also.
Thanks, Doug. I'm learning. It's
well, it's certainly an interest, and that's where it starts.
Yes. The older I get, the more I learn.
That's the way it works for all of us. Well, this is an important topic, and it is one that, it's a community. And so I just encourage everybody to engage their community as you think about these issues. And, as a community, you generally get to the right answer.
Great. Well, thank you, Doug. We are appreciative of you providing this to our military families and all that you do for our military families.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, guys.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.